1944, Admiralty Research Laboratory, Teddington. Lieutenant Commander Peter Marston stood before a sealed chamber containing what naval intelligence classified as Substance Z. Inside, 3 captured German submariners sat blindfolded, breathing normally. Within 90 seconds, all 3 would be weeping uncontrollably, vomiting, and begging for mercy. Yet 6 hours later, medical examinations would reveal 0 permanent damage. No burns, no lesions, no internal injuries. Marston had just witnessed the solution to Britain's most vexing naval warfare problem: how to force enemy submarine crews to surface without killing them, because dead men revealed no intelligence. The compound that achieved this impossible balance looked harmless, worked devastatingly, and arrived precisely when Britain needed it most. Fewer than 200 operational deployments occurred before war's end. The substance remains partially classified today. What naval historians call Substance Z represents one of the most effective non-lethal weapons ever deployed in combat, despite almost no public awareness of its existence. The problem confronting British naval intelligence in 1942 and 1943 was brutally straightforward. German U-boats controlled the Atlantic. Convoy losses exceeded sustainable levels. Depth charges killed submarines effectively but destroyed everything inside them. Codebooks burned. Encryption machines shattered. Crew members died before interrogation. Britain desperately needed enemy submariners alive. Alive meant intelligence. Alive meant Enigma rotors captured intact. Alive meant understanding German patrol patterns, refueling coordinates, Wolfpack tactics. The Operational Intelligence Center at the Admiralty calculated that 3 captured U-boat commanders provided more strategic value than 30 sunken submarines with dead crews. Conventional weapons failed against this requirement. Depth charges obliterated targets completely. Hedgehog mortars penetrated hulls, drowning crews within minutes. Torpedoes from British submarines created catastrophic hull failures. Even successful boarding actions resulted in scuttling charges detonated by German captains following standing orders. Article 48 of the Kriegsmarine Manual explicitly required commanders to destroy their vessels rather than allow capture. Boarding parties needed time to disable scuttling charges, time to secure classified materials, time to restrain crew members attempting sabotage. Most critically, time required the submarine to surface with its crew alive but incapacitated, unable to scuttle, unable to resist, unable to destroy evidence. British chemical warfare research had explored incapacitating agents since World War I. The Chemical Defense Experimental Station at Porton Down conducted extensive testing on compounds affecting respiratory systems, nervous systems, and psychological states. Mustard gas caused horrific injuries but killed slowly. Chlorine gas dispersed too quickly in open air. Tear gas irritated but rarely incapacitated trained soldiers. The breakthrough came not from Porton Down's military researchers, but from an industrial accident at a pharmaceutical production facility in Surrey. Dr. Ernest Whitten, born 1903 in Manchester, studied organic chemistry at Imperial College London. He joined Imperial Chemical Industries in 1928, working on synthetic compounds for agricultural pest control. In March 1941, a containment failure during experimental synthesis exposed 4 laboratory workers to an unknown volatile powder. Within 2 minutes, all 4 collapsed with symptoms resembling extreme seasickness combined with intense lacrimation. Their eyes produced tears so profusely that vision became impossible. Nausea reached levels preventing any coordinated movement. Yet within 6 hours, every symptom vanished completely. Medical examinations revealed no lasting damage whatsoever. Blood tests showed normal values. Lung function remained unimpaired. The workers described the experience as the most physically miserable 90 minutes of their lives, followed by complete recovery. Whitten recognized the military implications immediately. A compound producing total incapacitation without permanent injury represented the exact capability that naval intelligence required. He contacted the Admiralty through proper channels. Within 3 weeks, researchers at HMS Vernon, the Royal Navy's torpedo and mining school, began classified testing. The compound itself was designated DM powder, though documents referred to it variously as Substance Z, Compound 47, and in one remarkable instance of bureaucratic understatement, discomfort agent. The chemical name, adamsite or diphenylamine revealed its arsenic base, though the arsenic component functioned differently than traditional arsenic poisoning. DM powder appeared as a canary yellow crystalline substance, odorless when pure, nearly invisible when dispersed as an aerosol. The compound possessed unique characteristics that made it ideal for submarine warfare. It penetrated standard gas mask filters that protected against chlorine and mustard gas. It remained stable in seawater for up to 72 hours. Most critically, it vaporized at relatively low temperatures, meaning combustion grenades could disperse it effectively inside confined spaces. The physiological mechanism was precisely calibrated for maximum incapacitation with minimal lethality. Upon inhalation, DM powder irritated the respiratory tract immediately. Within 30 to 60 seconds, victims experienced intense burning sensations in the nose, throat, and chest. Uncontrollable coughing began. Then the nausea arrived. The nausea was described in clinical reports as profound and unmanageable. Test subjects at Porton compared it to the worst seasickness imaginable, amplified beyond any natural experience. Vomiting became continuous. Coordination disappeared. Vision blurred from excessive tear production. Pain radiated through sinus cavities. Headaches reached migraine intensity, yet the compound caused no chemical burns. It created no blistering. It penetrated no cellular membranes permanently. The symptoms, however unbearable, remained entirely reversible. After approximately 90 minutes of peak intensity, effects began subsiding. Within 4 to 6 hours, subjects returned to near-normal function. Within 24 hours, medical examinations detected no residual damage. This temporal profile was perfect for submarine capture operations. 90 minutes provided ample time for boarding parties to secure the vessel. 6 hours allowed captured crew members to recover sufficiently for initial interrogation. 24 hours meant prisoners arrived at interrogation centers in functional condition, without injuries that might justify clemency or medical evacuation. Commander Ralph Izard headed the HMS Vernon research team developing delivery mechanisms. Born 1910 in Portsmouth, Izard studied mechanical engineering at the Royal Naval College, Greenwich. He understood that chemical agents required specialized deployment systems. Simply throwing DM powder at a submarine accomplished nothing. The compound needed forced dispersal into the submarine's interior atmosphere. The delivery system that solved this problem looked deceptively simple but required extraordinary precision engineering. Designated the Type 17 canister, it measured 8 inches long, 2 inches in diameter. The exterior casing was machined from brass, chosen for corrosion resistance in seawater. Inside, a two-stage mechanism combined DM powder with a combustion charge that generated heat without flame. The combustion charge was critical. Too much heat would decompose the DM powder, rendering it inert. Too little heat would fail to vaporize the compound. The precise temperature requirement was 410 to 440 degrees Celsius, maintained for 23 to 27 seconds. HMS Vernon engineers tested hundreds of propellant combinations before achieving reliable performance. The canister included a time delay fuse adjustable from 15 seconds to 3 minutes. This allowed deployment methods varying from direct insertion through torpedo tube openings to attachment onto conning tower hatches. The brass casing was designed to corrode completely in seawater within 14 days, destroying evidence of chemical agent use. Materials throughout reflected complete sanitization. No manufacturer markings appeared on any component. No country of origin stamps. No identifying batch numbers beyond inscrutable internal reference codes. If recovered by German forces, nothing on the canister would confirm British origin or reveal deployment doctrine. Deployment doctrine itself represented months of tactical development. The Royal Navy established specialized teams designated chemical warfare deployment units, attached to submarine hunting groups operating from Londonderry, Liverpool, and Scapa Flow. Each unit consisted of 12 personnel, including a chemical weapons officer, demolitions specialists, and boarding party members trained in submarine systems. The intended operational sequence was precisely choreographed. First, depth charges or hedgehog attacks would damage the U-boat sufficiently to force surfacing, but not enough to sink it immediately. Second, surface vessels would close rapidly while the submarine crew attempted to evacuate or man deck guns. Third, the CWDU officer would deploy Type 17 canisters through any available opening, torpedo tubes, conning tower hatches, ventilation systems, or damaged hull sections. The canisters would detonate on time delay. DM powder would vaporize and disperse through the submarine's internal atmosphere within 90 seconds. Crew members still inside would become immediately incapacitated. Those who had evacuated to the deck would face conventional weapons, but critically would be unable to re-enter the submarine to activate scuttling charges. Boarding parties would enter once DM powder effects peaked. Wearing specialized respirators with activated charcoal filters specifically rated for arsenic compounds, they would secure classified materials, disable scuttling charges, and restrain incapacitated crew members. The entire operation from canister deployment to secured vessel required approximately 12 to 15 minutes. Captain Edmund Thornton commanded HMS Starling, one of the first vessels equipped with Type 17 canisters. His war diary from April 1944 provides rare documentation of actual deployment, though identifying details remain redacted in National Archives copies. The entry from 17 April 1944 describes engaging U-boat contact designated target uniform at coordinates redacted. Depth charge attacks damaged the submarine sufficiently to force surfacing. German crew members began evacuating through the conning tower hatch. Thornton's Chemical Warfare Deployment Unit officer, whose name appears blacked out in all surviving documents, deployed 3 Type 17 canisters through the open hatch before German personnel could secure it. The war diary records that within 2 minutes, German crew members visible on deck exhibited extreme distress and attempted to re-enter the vessel but were unable to coordinate movement sufficiently to descend the ladder. The boarding party entered at minute 4. They found 17 crew members inside, all incapacitated, none capable of activating scuttling charges. The captured submarine was redacted, though cross-referencing with German naval records suggests U-984 or U-740 based on date and location. Captured materials included an intact Enigma machine with current rotor settings, code books dated within the previous week, and operational orders detailing Wolfpack formations in the North Atlantic. More valuable than equipment were the prisoners. Interrogation at the Combined Services Detailed Interrogation Center in London revealed convoy tracking methods, refueling protocols from Type XIV supply submarines, and critically, confirmation that German naval intelligence had failed to recognize that Enigma had been compromised. The prisoners attributed their capture to experimental British weapons, not cryptographic failure. This intelligence misdirection represented an unanticipated benefit of DM powder deployment. German prisoners genuinely believed they had been defeated by superior chemical weapons rather than superior intelligence. Post-war analysis of German naval communications shows no indication that DM powder deployment triggered any suspicion of Enigma compromise. The strategic impact extended beyond individual captures. German Submarine Command issued revised protocols following reports of chemical weapons deployment. U-boats were ordered to maintain sealed ventilation systems when surfacing in combat zones. Crew evacuation drills were modified to prioritize hatch security. These procedural changes degraded operational efficiency. Sealed ventilation systems trapped diesel fumes and carbon dioxide. Slower evacuation drills increased vulnerability to conventional weapons, yet operational deployment remained extraordinarily limited. Fewer than 200 Type 17 canisters were manufactured between late 1943 and early 1945. Production occurred at an isolated facility near Birmingham, operated by personnel lacking knowledge of the end-use application. Chemical synthesis occurred separately at an ICI laboratory near Manchester. Final assembly took place at HMS Vernon under direct supervision of Commander Izzard's team. This extreme compartmentalization reflected both security concerns and international law considerations. The 1925 Geneva Protocol prohibited the use of chemical weapons in warfare. Britain was a signatory. However, the protocol's language specifically banned asphyxiating, poisonous, or other gases. DM powder technically fell outside this definition because it caused temporary incapacitation rather than asphyxiation or poisoning. The legal interpretation remained contentious within British government circles. The Foreign Office expressed concerns that DM powder deployment might trigger German retaliation with lethal chemical agents. The War Cabinet authorized limited use only in circumstances where intelligence value exceeded retaliation risks. This created a narrow operational window. DM powder could be deployed against individual submarines when intelligence capture was prioritized, but not as a general tactical weapon. The temporal factor proved even more limiting than legal concerns. Development did not reach operational readiness until mid-1944. By this time, the Battle of the Atlantic had shifted decisively in Britain's favor. Improved radar, increased escort carrier availability, and critically, comprehensive Enigma decryption meant U-boat interception rates had improved dramatically without requiring chemical weapons. Most submarine kills in 1944 and 1945 came from aircraft launch depth charges or long-range patrol attacks where boarding was impossible. The specific circumstances requiring DM powder deployment, damaged submarine forced to surface, boarding party available, intelligence value justifying capture, occurred rarely. Perhaps 30 to 40 times during the final 18 months of European warfare. Yet comparison with Allied alternatives reveals British technological sophistication. American naval forces developed no equivalent incapacitating agents for submarine warfare. The United States maintained chemical weapons stockpiles including phosgene and mustard gas, but these were lethal agents inappropriate for prisoner capture. The Office of Strategic Services explored various incapacitating compounds, but none reached operational deployment before war's end. Soviet naval doctrine relied exclusively on lethal force. No evidence exists of Soviet chemical weapons development targeting submarine crews specifically. Japanese naval forces possessed chemical weapons but never developed specialized submarine capture agents. Germany itself conducted extensive chemical weapons research, but focused on lethal nerve agents like tauben and sarin rather than incapacitating compounds. The British advantages over every other naval power included purpose-built non-lethal incapacitation with reversible effects, specialized delivery systems designed for confined maritime environments, time-calibrated symptom duration matching boarding operation requirements, complete operational sanitization preventing attribution, and legal interpretation allowing deployment under Geneva Protocol restrictions. Only 3 confirmed Type 17 canisters survive in institutional collections today. The Imperial War Museum Duxford holds one example under restricted access in their chemical weapons storage facility. The container's exterior shows characteristic brass patina. Internal mechanisms remain sealed and inert. Museum documentation classifies it as non-lethal incapacitating device maritime application, circa 1944. The Royal Navy Museum Portsmouth holds 2 examples, though neither is publicly displayed. Catalog entries identify them as Substance Z deployment systems, with reference numbers NMM 2019-84-1 and NMM 2019-84-2. Acquisition records indicate transfer from HMS Vernon's closure in 1986, suggesting these were evaluation samples retained for historical documentation rather than field-deployed units. The extreme rarity reflects deliberate destruction protocols. Chemical weapons, even non-lethal variants, face strict disposal requirements following VE Day. The Admiralty ordered all remaining Type 17 canisters destroyed by deep ocean dumping or chemical neutralization. DM powder stockpiles were chemically degraded and disposed of according to protocols established for arsenic compounds. Production facilities were decontaminated and returned to conventional manufacturing. Primary source documentation remains remarkably sparse. The National Archives at Kew holds relevant files in the ADM series for Admiralty records and WO series for War Office chemical warfare research. However, many documents were destroyed during the 1947 consolidation of chemical weapons records. Surviving files include ADM 18684, which contains technical specifications for chemical deployment systems, though DM powder is referenced only as Compound 47 without detailed analysis. The most comprehensive published source remains classified. The Ministry of Defence's Official History of British Chemical Weapons Development, compiled in 1968, has never been released for public access. Portions were quoted in Brian Baumer's book Britain and Biological Warfare, published by Palgrave Macmillan in 2001, but these excerpts focus on biological rather than chemical agents. Dr. Ernest Whitten, whose industrial accident discovery led to DM powder's military application, received no public recognition during his lifetime. He continued working at ICI until retirement in 1963, holding 17 patents for agricultural and industrial compounds. His obituary in the Journal of the Chemical Society in 1979 makes no mention of wartime contributions. The Official Secrets Act bound him to silence for 34 years after war's end. Commander Ralph Izard faced similar obscurity. His post-war career included service as naval attaché to Norway and technical advisor to the Ministry of Supply. He retired in 1958 with the rank of Rear Admiral. His Times obituary in 1984 described him as a distinguished naval engineer whose wartime contributions remain classified, offering no further detail. The weapon's legacy persists not through documented history, but through strategic influence on post-war naval doctrine. Every major navy developed submarine capture protocols following World War II. American, Soviet, and British forces established specialized teams trained in boarding disabled submarines. These units assumed chemical incapacitating agents would be available if needed, though actual stockpiles remain limited. The Cold War submarine intelligence race was predicated partially on capabilities that DM powder demonstrated. Both sides accepted that enemy submarines could potentially be captured intact if disabled properly. This assumption influenced submarine design. Scuttling charges became more sophisticated. Emergency destruction systems for classified materials improved. Crew training emphasized preventing capture rather than assuming death in combat. For understanding British chemical warfare development, DM powder demonstrates that effectiveness does not require massive production. 200 canisters achieved strategic impact through selective deployment. The weapon solved genuine problems through precise chemistry. It achieved measurable superiority over any equivalent system. The incapacitation functioned as clinical testing predicted. The boarding operations succeeded when conditions allowed deployment. The contrast with German approaches proves instructive. Germany invested heavily in nerve agent development, producing tons of tabun and sarin that were never used operationally. Britain invested modestly in a specialized incapacitating agent that saw limited but successful deployment. The German emphasis on overwhelming lethality reflected conventional military thinking. The British emphasis on intelligence capture through non-lethal incapacitation reflected operational creativity. April 1944. HMS Starling, North Atlantic. 3 Type 17 canisters tumbled through an open submarine hatch. German crew members on deck watched them fall. No explosion followed, just wisps of yellow vapor rising from ventilation openings. Then the screaming began. Men inside attempting to reach scuttling charges collapsed. Men on deck trying to descend found their legs wouldn't cooperate. Vision blurred, nausea overwhelmed training. 12 minutes later, British boarding parties controlled every compartment. Enigma machines secured, codebooks retrieved, 17 prisoners restrained and already beginning to recover. No one died, no permanent injuries occurred. German naval intelligence received reports of experimental British chemical weapons. Nothing suggested the enemy was reading their mail. 3 canisters, 1 submarine. Intelligence that influenced convoy routing for 6 months. 0 deaths, 0 international law violations, 0 public awareness for 8 decades. The most effective British naval weapon that almost no one knows existed, proving that sometimes the best wartime innovations are the ones that save lives to win wars.